Thank you so much for watching this message from our Young Adults Ministry here at Reston Bible Church. My name is David Wright, and I'm one of the pastors here at RBC and get to oversee this wonderful ministry. To know more about young adults, please follow us on Instagram at Reston Bible YA. Enjoy the message.
Once again, we get the Monahan duo. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Allie. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Exodus chapter 18. I hope you do have your Bibles. If you don't, there's always a great Bible app called YouVersion that you can quickly download. But you don't get to show off the little notes you take in the margins if you only bring that. So my name is David Wright. For those of you who are new, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us this evening. We've been in a series covering the story of Exodus that we've been calling Out of Egypt. This has really taken most of our 2025 so far. Y'all are like, I know, it feels like that. And we've got 2 more weeks. I hope it's been a great series for you. I hope it's been beneficial to you as we see what is the most quoted narrative in the rest of the Bible right here, which is the Exodus account. This shapes the way that people of God think about their life, think about their God, think about their salvation. It shaped them from this moment, and it continues to shape us today. And we've seen this character named Moses who is tasked with the with the requirement to bring God's people out of Egypt and bring them as a new nation, a nation that is going to be committed to God. We've seen them walk through the waters of the Red Sea. We've seen their enemies be flooded behind them. And right away, what Sterling preached last week, we already see some cracks in the foundation of this new nation. This new nation sees one of the most powerful works of Yahweh, the parting of the Red Sea, and then immediately starts complaining, immediately starts grumbling. And I feel like the application is pretty obvious there. Like, I don't even need to go into it. And so, Sterling, thank you so much for last week. Appreciate you, brother, bringing the word. And that was really encouraging for all of us. So thank you. And then this week, we're going to continue that story. And we're going to see a very practical story where Moses is visited by his father-in-law. And his father-in-law dispenses upon him some great wisdom. So let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll get into the text together. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you that it is equipping in so many ways. And thank you for this particular passage. As young adults who are in their first career, in their second job, in college, as we sort of envision ourselves as servants of you, as current, or if not future leaders, I pray that you would equip us to be people who serve you well in our workplace, who serve you well in our churches and our families. And I pray that this passage and this message tonight would be one small part as you develop us to be people who witness well to you everywhere we go. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. During COVID, I was in seminary, and when COVID hit, a couple of my friends, we decided to run a marathon together. Except all the marathons were canceled because of COVID. And so at different times, we did homemade marathons where we'd go to local Greenway, kind of our local equivalent of the WNOD, and we'd run a marathon. With training, of course. We didn't just do that. I'm not that athletic for sure. And for one of my friends, my former roommate, he ran this marathon, and the plan was that he was going to run the marathon and that I would support him in the last half of this marathon as a pacer. He already had a pacer that was running the whole thing with him. That's the really good runner over there. And then I was going to come in as a third guy for the last 13.1 miles, 13.2 miles really, and pace him for the last bit. And when I joined him at the halfway point, he was going over a minute faster than his goal pace, which if you're a runner, that's serious business. And I was really nervous for him. I was like, Tyler, you're cranking over a minute faster than you want to. And he was like, yeah, David, I'm feeling good. We've already made the call. I'm gonna really keep this pace, and I'm gonna go for it here. So mile 14 hit, mile 15 hit, mile 16 hit, and I kept on saying, Tyler, I'm a little bit nervous for you. I'm a little bit nervous for you. And sure enough, around mile 20, which if you've ever run a marathon, you know that is the notorious wall mile where your body starts often shutting down, my friend's body shut down. And in the matter of like 50 yards, he went from an 8-minute pace of a marathon to walking. And for the rest of the marathon, we jogged, really walked, shuffled. The pace that Tyler, my friend, had started out with, he thought he could sustain for the whole race. But what he figured out a little bit too late was that that pace was not sustainable at all. And in Exodus 18, we read something similar. Moses is visited by his father-in-law, whose name is Jethro, and Jethro observes that Moses is going at a leadership pace that ultimately is going to be unsustainable in the long term. While Moses thinks he can keep this up, Jethro sees that he's going to be hit with a proverbial wall and cost himself and the nation of Israel in the process. And so Jethro gives Moses some advice on what it looks like to lead people in a way that lasts and goes the distance. And so the title of my message this evening is Leadership That Lasts. We're going to look at Jethro's advice to Moses and sort of seek to apply it in our own lives. Now, let me make a real quick note before we actually get into the text here, is that some of you have already tuned me out because I used the dreaded L word. That's leadership. Some of you already have said, I'm not a leader. What is this going to have to do with me? I don't want to be a leader. I'm not a leader. I don't envision myself as a leader. But hold on one second. John Maxwell famously says that leadership is influence. Leadership is influence. And you probably, whether you are on the corporate track to be a CEO at your job or you are a sophomore in college, you probably have some sort of influence on people. And I want to remind you that traditional leadership is seen as leadership from the front, and that is a valid form of leadership. But leadership is not just from the front, it's leadership from the middle. It's leadership from the back. You have influence from the front, from the middle, from the back, wherever you are in your organization, at your job, in your workplace, in your school, whatever it may be. And ultimately, you are responsible right now for leading yourself. And one day, many of you are going to get married and have kids, and you're going to be responsible for leading your children, leading in your home. And so it's important, whether or not you envision yourself as a leader, you need to take some leadership lessons, and leadership lessons that last. So this message is going to be a little bit different than my normal message. My normal message is a little bit more preachy. This is going to be a little more teachy. And what I want to do is walk through this passage in two parts: Moses' weaknesses and Jethro's wisdom. Moses' weaknesses and Jethro's wisdom. Now, I'm going to jump to verse 13 in chapter 18. But just to summarize real quick where we are, what happened in chapter 18 is that Moses is visited by his father-in-law Jethro, who brings Moses' wife Zipporah and Moses' 2 sons with them. Now, if you remember back to chapter 4, the last time we've seen Zipporah, it wasn't a great situation. And I'll just leave it at that. You can go read chapter 4 if you'd like. I've already mentioned that enough, and I did preach on it to my chagrin. So they come to visit Moses, and what Jethro does is Jethro witnesses all of what God has done between chapters 5 through 17. And Jethro has this big moment. See, Jethro was formerly called a priest at Midian, but his religious convictions were kind of unsure. We're like, what does it mean to be a priest at Midian? Priest to what God? We get the feeling that he's not some crazy pagan, but we're like, are you a Yahweh worshiper? We're not sure. But what happens in chapter 18 at the beginning is that Jethro says in verse 11, now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods. Now I know that Yahweh specifically is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. So Jethro's religious convictions were a little bit unclear, but now they seem to be very clear. This is a moment of conversion. At bare minimum, it's a moment of faith solidification of some sort. I think it's probably a moment more of conversion. And so at verse 13, it's the next day. Notice that first phrase, the next day. The very next day after Jethro confesses that Yahweh is the Lord above all lords and offers sacrifices to him, we read this in verses 13 through 16. The next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning until evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." So the very next day, after Jethro's potential conversion, he observes that Moses is in this interesting dilemma where Moses is the one and only judge of the nation of Israel. And people are coming to him morning until evening, like a 12-hour shift. You're in healthcare, you know what a 12-hour shift looks like. And this 12-hour shift plus of people coming to Moses with all of their problems and all of their disputes, and Moses makes it known to them what is the will of God in their life. And we see this weakness that Jethro points out, is that first, Moses is operating as a one-man show. There is no one to help carry the burden for him. And there are many reasons why Moses might be operating as a one-man show. It might be due to demand. People are coming and they specifically want Moses. If you've ever been in a leadership position, sometimes people come to you with stuff that really shouldn't come to you, but they want the guy or the gal who's in charge. So they come directly to you. It might be due to demand. It might be due to proving oneself. After all, Moses has not been a perfect leader historically. He will not continue to be a perfect leader either. And maybe he's trying to prove himself of some sort. I'm capable of leading you better than the Egyptians could lead you. Maybe this is due to tradition or expectation. This is how it's always been done. The leader always does this. The leader always judges among the people. Or maybe it's due to Moses being a control freak. Maybe Moses invented the statement, if you want it done right, do it yourself. There's no one who can quite do it like I can. Whatever the reason, it poses a problem. And Jethro, who is seemingly older and more experienced, sees this right away. Look at verse 17. Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone." So Moses' second weakness is that he lacks the long-term perspective of someone who is older and wiser. Moses doesn't see it, but Jethro sees it right away. That's why his first question is something along the lines of, "What in the world are you doing?" In other words, you're missing something obvious here. Whereas Moses is caught up in what needs to happen in the here and now, Jethro sees the long-term consequences of this methodology, that it's not built to last. And he says in verse 18, "You and the people with you." So it's not just personal, it's corporate. "You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out." To go back to the running analogy, you will hit a wall if you continue at this pace. Now put yourself in Moses' shoes for a second. Think of all the reasons why Moses might respond to this with, "What do you know, Jethro?" Moses could write off Jethro due to his own position. Jethro, I don't know if you knew this, but you've never quite been in the type of position I'm in. Okay? You've never quite led this many people. Have you ever been in any position like this before? You were a priest over in little Midian over here. He could write him off due to position. You've never been where I've been before. He could write Jethro off due to ability. Jethro, don't tell me leadership advice. Frankly, I'm a better leader than you are. What do you know about leading in this situation? You were my priest for 40 years when I was in Midian. I didn't think you were all that good. I thought your sermons were pretty average. Or maybe Moses could write off Jethro due to his own spiritual maturity. Jethro, I don't know if you realize this, but you just professed faith in Yahweh yesterday. 24 hours in, and you're already giving me Moses advice. Isn't that great? Not to mention that, stop being that overbearing father-in-law. No one likes the overbearing in-laws. Jethro, you're one day into this faith thing. Here I am the leader, and you're giving me advice. And yet, Moses is going to show the humility required to listen to his father-in-law and heed his words of advice. There's a lot of applications that I think us all as young adults can take from this. But let me give two situations where this might apply. First, at work, you might have a boss, or you may have simply an older coworker that wants to give you advice, but you frankly have trouble listening to. And you have trouble listening to their advice because, and you would never say this out loud, but, well, you think you're better at the job than they are. So what do they have to say to you? I'm grinding out here. I'm a young professional adult. I'm trying to make my mark. You're working 40 hours a week. I'm working 60 hours a week. I saw the sales numbers come out last quarter. I'm higher than you are. What do you have to tell me? This might apply with your family. You might be a Christian and have non-Christian parents. Or you may be a Christian and you have Christian parents, but frankly, you think they're a little bit more lukewarm than you are. And so you may not want to admit this. You may never say this out loud either. But when your parents try to give you advice, you think, what do you know? You haven't been to church in 3 months. I'm the one following the Lord. I'm the one who really fears the Lord out here. And if you are in a position like that, or you've been in a position like that, I want you to look at Moses' example here. Moses could have used excuses. He could have used honest assessment or dishonest assessment. He could have found a way to write off listening to his father-in-law, but he didn't. Because Jethro has something that Moses doesn't have, and that is the long-term perspective of wisdom that only comes with age. And so regardless of who your boss is or who your parents are, could it be that one application is to stop discounting their long-term wisdom and perspective? Could it be that your growth in Christ, if you have non-believing parents, is actually becoming a subtle avenue of pride, and now you're not even listening to your folks anymore? They have advice on things of the world that they're actually kind of experts on. You may not take their spiritual advice all that seriously, but you know what? They know cars really well, and they know school really well, and they know work really well, and you're writing all that off because you think you're on a spiritually higher pedestal than they are. Now, I'm not saying you need to listen to every piece of advice from your parents as a young adult. And I'm not saying you need to do everything that your boss says. But Craig Groeschel has this great quote. He says, "Respect is earned, honor is given." Respect is earned, honor is given. Even if you don't frankly respect your boss. Even if you don't frankly respect the decisions your parents have made. What can you do? You can still give them honor. You can value their long-term perspective. And let me just take an extreme example. Let's say you come from a family that is so broken that you literally cannot trust anything your dad says. But let's say he knows cars really well. That's his thing. He always wants to talk with you about cars. Give him the honor of helping you out next time you have a car problem. Show him that honor. You may not be able to take much wisdom from anything else he says if you're in a really bad situation, but you know what you can do? You can honor him where honor is due. What does it look like to honor those who you frankly don't have that much more respect, but are over you? Let me encourage you to think about that. So Moses shows a lot of humility here. He listens to someone who is older, wiser, and has a long-term perspective. And so we've seen Moses' weaknesses. He's operating as a one-man show, and he is lacking someone older and wiser in his life with a long-term perspective. And at this point, we see Jethro's wisdom played out. This is what Jethro says in verse 19. He continues. He says, "Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do." So Jethro is about to give Moses this master plan of delegation. And he starts out by stating that Moses has a very important role. His role is that he needs to be focused on instructing the nation of Israel on what they must do in order to walk in obedience and follow the Lord. And what's happened is that Moses has been so tied up in disputing these matters as a judge is that he's neglecting his primary task. He's too sucked in with these little tasks. They're important, but as a result, he's neglecting his primary task with it, which is overseeing, teaching, and direction. This should remind us a little bit of Acts 6, if you remember, when the apostles appoint these proto-deacons to serve the needs of the widows and others. And they appoint these deacons to handle these needs so that the apostles can focus on what God's called them to do. God's called them to teach. God's called them to lead. God's called them to pray. And so they appoint these qualified deacons to take care of the practical needs so that they can focus on what the Lord requires of them. Here, Moses will be instructed to delegate, but he won't be instructed to delegate in order to disengage with his leadership task. He's not going to be instructed to delegate so that he can get to the point where he clocks out at 3 p.m. every day and he goes and plays pickleball. That's not the point. He's delegating not to lessen his hours necessarily. He's delegating to focus himself on his priorities in his unique position. Which leads to Jethro's first piece of wisdom here. Delegation is not about disengagement, but about priorities. Delegation is not about disengagement, but about priorities. So a good question for you this evening, or some good questions for you this evening, might be, what are my priorities? What has the Lord uniquely called me to do? What are my gifts, and how do I determine those? Now, if we were all 50, 60 years old in this room, we might all, or at least close to all, have a pretty clear understanding of exactly how the Lord's wired me, what the Lord's call on my life might be, and how I need to focus. But for many of you, you're still sort of figuring all that out right now. You're like, I'm not even quite sure what my spiritual gifts are. I'm not quite sure where my interests lie, where my passions lie. I'm not quite sure exactly where I fit in my career. I'm not exactly sure where I fit in my church. And here's my advice to you if you're in that position. If you're like, I'm not quite sure what my gifts are, my priorities are, and where exactly I should be focusing my time. Here's my advice. Allow me a metaphor from my small children. This is not to be pejorative towards you, but I'm in the thick of raising small children, and so that's how I think right now, okay? So just permit me with this analogy. Right now, Olivia and Claire are 4 and 2 years old, which means that whenever dinner comes out to them and it's something they don't recognize, they don't want anything to do with it. They say, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. And they push their plate away. But one thing that Abby and I always, hopefully, when we're being good parents, we always do this. One thing that we do is we say, you need to take a bite. You need to take a bite. If you don't like it after you take a bite, fine. But you need to try it. Sometimes they have a bite and they actually realize they like it. Like a different kind of ice cream than what they're used to. Who'd have thought you would maybe like that? And then other times they try a bite and they don't like it. But they've tried a bite and they haven't spit it out. In some sense, that's my advice to you. If you're wondering, what are my gifts and what are the priorities that the Lord's put in my life? Try things. Do it once. If your boss says, I want you to come to this conference because we're working on this side project and I think you'd be interested in it, well, if you got the time on your hands, say yes. If someone says, hey, I know you got some extra time off because you got a good job with some great perks, why don't you come serve at kids camp this summer? Say yes. Summer camp. That's a paid advertisement. You can Venmo me later. So this is the time, if you are not quite in a position where you know exactly where your gifts lie and where the Lord might be directing you, now's the time to just sort of say yes to a bunch of things. Try things out. You know, I never would have known that I liked disability ministry until I actually did Johnny and Friends for the first time. I would have never known I liked preaching until I was given the opportunity to preach my first sermon, and I caught the bug. Some of these things you're going to try for the first time, and you're going to think that you hate them, but you actually love them. And the Lord is going to use that to equip you to serve well in your workplace, in the church, and whatever it might be. So right now, in this young adult season, try it once, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. And if you do, now you got another tool in your tool belt. So first, delegation is not disengagement, it's about priorities. Next, Jethro says this in verse 21. He says, "Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy, and who hate a bribe. And place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of 10,000, of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens." So second, Jethro says this: delegation should be based on competency and character. Should be based on competency and character. He says, pick able men. So there's a competency component. And then he says, pick people who have three characteristics. Number one, they fear God. Number two, they are trustworthy. And number three, they hate bribes. So there's a competency and a character aspect. Now, it would be easy to apply this from the perspective of Moses. And for some of you, you should apply it from the perspective of Moses. Some of you have already risen the ranks in your jobs, or you're kind of like a big man on campus in your like college ministry or whatever it might be, and you got some people who are looking up to you in leadership. This is a really good application for you. Look for character and competency. Mim has given me this thing right here. Sorry, you're having to listen to my breath or something like that. So that's a good application for you. If you've got people working under you, people who are serving under you, look for people who demonstrate character and competency. But let's take this from the reverse position. Because for many of you, you're looking at your lives and you're like, who do I delegate things to? I'm the one they delegate things to. I'm the one who's walking around. If anything, I mean, I'm not even the leader of tens right now. Like, I'm trying to be the leader of tens. And so I think the application right now for you is less who to delegate to. It's how do you become someone who's worth delegating to? How do I become the coworker? How do I become the church member that is trustworthy to handle things when they are passed off to me? And I think this actually lends to a little bit of a cleaner application. Because if you're in Moses' position, let's say you work at, you're a government job, you got people under you, and you're like, okay, how do I take the three qualifications of fear God, trustworthy, and hate a bribe? Well, I might be able to take the back two, but what about that fear God one? That may not be as clean of an application because you work with mostly non-believers, right? You don't want to require someone to be a Christian to delegate responsibility to. But you can apply that if you see it from the reverse side. If you're someone who wants to be someone who's worthy of being delegated to, you can come into your job, secular, corporate, whatever it might be, and say, you know what, I'm going to lead with fearing the Lord. I'm going to hate a bribe. I'm going to be shown as trustworthy. So let's make this practical right now. What does it look like for you right now to be someone who fears the Lord, someone who is trustworthy, and someone who hates a bribe? Well, if you're a college student, you got finals coming up in a week or two, right? You're like, I thought I could take a mental break, but thank you for bringing that up. And my encouragement to you is you got a couple more weeks yet left. Put your best foot forward. You have the opportunity to do real work in front of you. And here's the challenge right now. Here is your application for hating a bribe. No one's offering you money, but ChatGPT is offering you a free A. Some of y'all hate this application right now.
Yeah.
And if I write this paper, I'm going to spend 15 hours writing my final paper, and I'm probably going to get a B+. ChatGPT could write it for me in 5 seconds, and I might even get an A. Which are you going to choose? I think I heard someone whisper ChatGPT. I'm pretty sure I just heard that from somewhere. At least you're honest about it. I mean, I'll give you that. And look, let me just give you the long-term picture here. Unless you're like on the very verge of whether or not you're going to be able to go to med school based on the one grade of this paper, the grade of this paper, it probably doesn't really matter that much. You know what does matter? The character with which you take away. Write that final paper. Do that final project. Do it for the glory of the Lord. Be someone who is unwilling to cut corners. By the way, I don't think ChatGPT is all bad. I just think if you say, write me a 2,000 word paper on this, and then you copy and paste it and then hand it in. That's bad, okay? So I think ChatGPT can actually be a pretty good tool when used correctly. Okay, so let's say you're not a college student or a grad student, but you're a young professional. Whether you are someone who's in coding, whether you're taking an order at a Chick-fil-A drive-thru, whether you're going on a sales call, you might say, I'm going to put my best foot forward, and I'm going to do this for the glory of God. I'm going to fear Him. I'm going to be trustworthy with the little work that's given to me, whether it's flipping burgers or going on a sales call or cold calling some customer. I'm going to put my best foot forward and be proven trustworthy with the little bit that's been entrusted to me. Let me give an application that I gave briefly at our men's breakfast on Saturday, but let me flesh it out a little bit more. I would encourage many of you, especially for those of you who are working your job and you've gotten good at it and it doesn't really take you all that much anymore, you're only having to work 5-6 hours a day, whatever it might be, I'd encourage you to take initiative, go to your boss for the purpose of putting more on your plate. Prove that you are a trustworthy coworker. Think about a side project that you could take on that would benefit your company or your team. Better yet, think of something that your boss doesn't like to do, that you like to do, and offer to take it off their plate. Don't go to your boss and say, I've got room for more work. What you got for me? Because now you're giving your boss more work. Go to your boss with a plan. Hey, I've been thinking about this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I would really love to take this off your plate. And here's what I'm going to need. I'm going to need about $2,000 to sponsor this project, and I'm going to equip this person to do it with me. All I really need is your sign-off, and if we want to touch base about halfway between the project, I think I could use that as well. Well, now you've walked into your boss with a plan. You're proving yourself to be trustworthy. And even if your boss says, I really can't do that for you right now, well, at least now you've established yourself as a person who is eager for more work. You're eager to do things the right way. And when you're 55, 60 years old and you're taking care of your aging parents, all you might be able to afford at that point is 30 hours a week. But as a young adult, many of you can afford more. You can put more on your plate. And let me just encourage you, that's an application for both guys and gals. But let me especially encourage you guys to do that. Because at this point in your life, you only have yourself to take care of. And when you have yourself to take care of, the tendency for many of you is to be like, I mean, I can eat PB&J and chill with no furniture. Like, I don't need that. I don't need that promotion. I'm that guy, by the way, okay? So let's just get it out there. That's not an insult. I'm that guy. But here's a good goal for you right now. You're a young professional. Not all of you are going to be able to do this. And I don't want this to create a yoke or a burden on you. But I think it's a really good goal for you young men to put yourself in a career position so that when you get married and have kids, you can give your wife the opportunity to stay home with the kids if she so chooses. Now, your wife may want to work full-time. Your wife may want to work part-time. Your wife may want to stay home full-time. I don't know what the disposition of your wife is going to be, but I think many women would appreciate the option. You may not be able to do that. That's fine. But what it's probably going to take for you to get to the place where at least you can offer that to your wife is it's probably going to take a couple of promotions. And you know what it's going to take for you to get a couple of promotions? Good, reliable delegation and work. So fellas, let me encourage you. You may only have yourself to take care of now, but in 5 years, you might have some mouths to feed. And right now is the time for you to advance in your career and put yourself in a good position. Okay, anyways. That was my aside. If you think that's chauvinistic or something like that, we can talk afterwards. This is exactly what Ali read from Jesus, that the desire, wherever you are, in whatever position you are in, that you would be faithful with a little. And right now, as a young adult, you probably have a little. You would be faithful with a little, and at some point, your faithfulness or lack thereof is going to translate to your faithfulness or lack thereof of greater things. So the story concludes with this. Look at verse 22. Jethro continues, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide for themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will hear the burden with you. They will bear the burden with you, excuse me. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure. And all this people will go to their place in peace. Verse 24, so Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law. There's the humility. And did all that he said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, of tens, and they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country. So lastly, Jethro says that delegation is the key to personal and communal sustainability. Personal and communal sustainability. Back in verse 18, Jethro said that if this continues, Moses and the people will wear themselves out. He will wear himself out personally. Moses, you're not going to be able to keep this pace, and you're going to wear the people out. There's going to be too much demand for you. They're going to be stuck in their demand without a ruler. They're going to be back in line like, a roller coaster at Disney World, 3 hours out, waiting to see you. They're going to be frustrated. You're going to wear yourself out. You're going to wear your people out if you don't delegate. So good leadership and delegation blesses both the individual, Moses in this case, and the community, all the people. There's a well-known leadership idea called the snake and the starfish. Has anyone heard of this before? The snake and the starfish. Oh, look at that. Okay. One. Perfect. Me and Charlie just hanging out with snakes and starfishes. So this idea of the snake and the starfish says that organizations often function like one or the other. Some organizations, whether it's a church, a company, a family even, they function like a snake. They have one person at the top, and that person at the top sort of directs everyone. Now, I'm not aiming to take any swipes, but I've heard certain churches talk about how they follow the Moses model, and it's really the snake model. Now, interestingly enough, the Moses model is actually wrong here. So when churches say we follow the Moses model, I'm like, what part of the Moses model? Because his model wasn't working all that well at first. So this is the snake model. This is what Moses is currently functioning under. And what happens with a snake, if some of you more wilderness-minded people, is when you cut the head off of the snake, what happens with the body? It wriggles around, it coils up a little bit, and then it dies. So that's one type of organization. Another type of organization is a starfish organization. There is no central brain in a starfish. What happens with a starfish is when you cut off one of the arms, the starfish can actually grow that arm back. And the rest of the arms can take advantage or kind of build up the gap for the lack of this one arm. And so when a starfish gets its arm lopped off, it can grow a new one, and even that arm can actually potentially turn into a new starfish, which is kind of cool. God's creation. Amazing. Amazing stuff. We're like going into space. I'm like, let's go deeper into the ocean. I mean, we don't even know what's on our own planet yet. And so here's the goal. For those of you, specifically those of you who are middle managers, here's what I mean by middle manager. You started at the bottom of your job. You've gotten maybe a promotion or two. Now you have people under you. You still have people you got to answer to, but now you got people under you. You're kind of in the middle here. For those of you who are middle managers, what you want to do is organize your team in a way that it functions like a starfish, not like a snake with you at the head. And one good question for you to ask yourself is, can my team thrive without me? Whether you are in college and you're heading up a campus ministry, whether you're in the workforce and you got people under you, ask yourself this question: can my team thrive without me? Can it thrive in my absence? And one way that you make sure that your team can thrive without you is that you build up leaders behind you. And when you build up leaders behind you, you build them up not just by giving them tasks to do, but giving them real authority and decision-making power. You empower them to actually do things that are valuable. Rochelle puts it like this. He says, if you delegate tasks, you get followers. If you delegate authority, you get leaders. So for those of you who are middle managers right now, who you have people that you answer to, you have people that are under you, ask this question. What are areas of authority that I can delegate to trustworthy people? What are things that I don't like to do that the people working for and with me do like to do? And how can I match those things up? Now, you may have to delegate tasks to start out with. You may have to hold someone's hand, show them exactly the ropes, show them exactly how to do it. You got deadlines. You got to make sure things get done. Some of you got people working under you that are not the most reliable, so you got to do some hand-holding. But the long-term goal is that you empower people to have real authority and responsibility. And ultimately, that when you're on vacation, your team doesn't flounder without you. You know, if I can just encourage someone publicly, I've really seen this in Mima. Mima started out as a volunteer at RBC. She just came here in 2020. And she was faithful with her responsibility and what was delegated to her just as a normal volunteer. She noticed at some point that Hannah Beth, who had like 17 different jobs on her plate, it's only down to 16 now, which is great. But she had 17 different jobs on her plate, and Mima noticed that she was a little bit stressed. Mima found out that Hannah Beth's help at work was actually quitting. And so Mima said, hey, can I help you with a few things? And can I even apply for this job? And she was wondering, do I need a college degree for the job or not? And Hannah Beth was like, no, you don't. Like, come on, apply. And so she applied. She got a job at the welcome desk. She was faithful with the welcome desk work. She still is faithful with the welcome desk work. And so when Hannah Beth was transitioning out of the young adult and shepherd group role, we were looking at different people to fill her. And the ideal candidate was Mima, but we didn't want to just hand it to her because we wanted to interview a few other people as well. And they were great candidates, but ultimately we decided that Mima was the one we wanted to roll with. And now Mima's been faithful in her role. So she moved from a volunteer role. She went to the welcome desk. She got a job at RBC. She got promoted to this position. And now Mima is in a position where she's actually delegating herself. She was telling me, she's like, I got to do a little bit better job of delegating for myself, but she's doing a great job. And for me, in this position, one thing I greatly appreciate is I can go on vacation like I did a couple weeks ago, and I have trust that people like Mima and many others of you are going to make sure that this is run just as well, probably better with my absence. Now, Mima's about to go on vacation next week, so we'll see if we can function without her. That's going to be the real challenge. But I've appreciated that in her. And so I think a good application is see how she's grown in her own leadership and try to emulate that. This is ultimately what Jesus does with his delegation of leadership. Jesus' own message is carried on by his disciples. He gives his disciples the mission at the end of their lives, and because Jesus delegates the mission to them, it then spreads out over across the world. And here we are 2,000 years later. Now let me end this message with this. My prayer for you is that you will be leaders that last. My prayer for you is that you will be leaders that build personal disciplines, routine, play in your life, good work hours, diligence, and that ultimately you would be found faithful. That you would be found, as Paul can say at the end of his life, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have completed the task that the Lord Jesus Christ has given me to do. And so I want to conclude with one application here. Larry, could you raise your hand? And Myung-hee, I saw you too. Myung-hee, can you raise your hand? Oh, right there. Perfect. I'm staring right at you. Larry and Myung-hee are here as an older gentleman and an older woman who are here to provide you wisdom and help you gain a long-term perspective. And I don't want, at the risk of putting like 20 coffees on both of their plates, I know personally that both Larry and Myung-hee would love to connect with you. Let them be that Jethro voice of wisdom, because Larry's going to be able to see some long-term things in your life that you're not going to be able to see. Myung-hee's going to be able to see some long-term things in your life that you're not going to be able to see. And so my application is, if you're looking for that Jethro person, you got two options right there for you. Let me pray and we'll move to discussion. Lord, thank you that this passage even made it in the scriptures. Thank you that it is practical and encouraging to us. And I pray that we would take this passage to heart. Lord, thank you that it's been a little bit of a different night and a little bit of a different style of teaching. But I pray that we as young adults would be proven where we are in our workplaces, in our churches, in our small groups, one day in our families, that we would be found to be those three characteristics that Moses looks for. That we would fear you, that we would be found trustworthy, and that we would hate a bribe, that we would not serve God and money, but that we would serve you and you alone. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching this video from our Young Adults Ministry here at Reston Bible Church. We're really happy to be able to provide this message to you as a resource in your own discipleship journey. But we don't want this message or our ministry to get in the way of your own local church involvement. So let me encourage you from wherever you're watching to get plugged into a local church near you. And if you're in the Northern Virginia area and you're not plugged into a local church, come see us at RBC on a Sunday morning at either one of our 9 or 10:45 services. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to get you plugged in here at a local church. We hope that you enjoyed this message.